Hello everybody, this is Chris and welcome to Melchester Model Railway. There was a real boost for Southern Railway modellers during the Bachmann Winter 2023 announcements when they revealed a newly tooled project within its EFE brand, a double-O gauge model of the Southern Railway booster Coco electric locomotive in association with the Kernow Model Railway Centre. These large 99-ton Coco locomotives, powered by the Southern's expanding third rail network, were intended for work on the heavy Victoria to Newhaven boat trains and were introduced in 1941. Having been in the pipeline since 1936 when the Southern Railway Locomotive and Electrical Committee met, and the then engineer for new works, Alfred Raworth, proposed two new electric locomotives specifically for this traffic. CC1 appeared in 1941, with CC2 following in 1945, and although the initial idea had been for a Bobo locomotive, Bulleid's contribution to the design resulted in a larger and heavier Coco locomotive, better designed for dealing with unfitted freight duties. There were even drawings for a one Coco one-wheel arrangement at one point. At the design stage, Raworth specified the locomotives should be able to maintain drawbar pull when there were gaps in the third rail supply, such as at junctions and level crossings. This resulted in two large booster sets that each locomotive contained, and from where they derived their booster nicknames. Essentially, these were large flywheels within a motor generator that could continue to supply power to the traction motors. One member of the footplate staff recounted a story that when we relieved the boat train at Newhaven, we had to uncouple and run forward off the juice rail into the sidings, and then run around the train purely on booster power. The power lasted about 10 to 15 minutes on the flywheel, so we would cross our fingers each time hoping we would make it. A third locomotive, 20003, appeared in 1948, but the proposed plan for a larger fleet of these locomotives never materialised. By the mid-1960s, they were considered non-standard, with their work on the Newhaven boat trains being usurped by Class 74 electro-diesels. They were, however, a firm favourite on Royal trains and other specials. But the 1968 National Traction Plan had decreed that the Southern region would retain its entire fleet of electric locomotives, with the exception of the three Coco booster locomotives, and all three were withdrawn by the end of that year. So, let's now turn our attention to the first of two versions of this model that I've now added to my collection. The owner's information sheet gives a brief potted history, but I'd really like to recommend special issue number 11 in the Southern Way series of books for a thoroughly comprehensive and detailed analysis of the life of these three locomotives. It's well worth getting a copy if you're interested in finding out more. The locomotive I'm looking at first is the one in BR mixed traffic black and silver livery, primarily because this is from the era I favour most on my layout, and it's the model I'm going to be fitting a sound chip to utilise the onboard speaker. Not to mention, of course, the fact that it's going to look wonderful with the Bulleid 1 Coco 1 diesel locomotive, which I already have in my collection. The information sheet shows how and where to fit the third rail pickup shoes and head codes that come in the accessory bag, which also contains screw couplings, vacuum and steam pipes, and a magnetic wand for switching on the cab lights if you're operating on DC. So here it is then. There's a nice confident weight to this model, which bodes well for traction capability. But will it be able to haul a 16-coach test train or a 75 loaded wagon freight train as was the case in the 1942 brake trials. Well, it looks as if this is going to be a stunning model, and if the Kernow Model Railway Centre bullied diesel is anything to go by, it will be, especially as Kernow's own Graham Muspratt, the guru of all things Southern, led the project development. If you haven't seen my review of their bullied diesel locomotive, click the link in the right-hand corner. In the meantime, let's head over to Melchester's shed for a closer look at the detail. The second of the booster locomotives, CC2, under Bulleid's numbering scheme, became 20,002 under BR. It had originally emerged from Ashford Works in 1945 in the splendid malachite green livery, before being repainted into experimental ultramarine blue in 1948. By 1950, BR had decided that their mixed-traffic diesel and electric locos should be presented in mixed-traffic black and silver, with the early BR Cycling Lion crest on display. I always think that this livery suits Bulleid's diesel or electric locomotives the best, and on the model it's certainly the best way of appreciating the detail on the bogies. You can clearly see how the primary suspension was achieved by way of these 15-leaf laminated springs, or 11 as I counted on the model. Who needs rivet counters when you can count leaf springs? These transmitted weight from the bogie frames through secondary coil springs to the axles, which were fitted with the unique-looking Bulleid Firth Brown wheels of 3 foot 6 inch diameter. Initially, there were no less than 5 sandboxes per side per bogie, later reduced to just 2, which you can clearly see at the end of each bogie. Bachmann have tooled up for this difference, as you'll see when I take a look at the second model. Each bogie carried 4 electrical pickup shoe beams made of teak, which were secured to the ends of the axle boxes. I've yet to fit the shoes myself, but they come in an accessory bag. This is so that the user can be certain of clearances if they've installed third rail on their own layout. You can hardly miss the other form of electrical pickup, which was via a pantograph for overhead current collection. This was mounted in a well on the roof. It had been provided as a safety measure so that sidings could be electrified at less risk to operating staff. However, the only sections so equipped were at Balcombe and Lovers Walk in Brighton, so the pantograph saw almost no use at all. Bulleid's standard construction method of the time consisted of metal sheets fitted over a frame, resulting in a rather slab-sided appearance. This construction method doesn't show up particularly well on the black model, but will be seen more clearly on the malachite green version. The bowed end to the cab roof helped to alleviate the austere look a little, but I like to think that Bulleid must have softened his approach somewhat for the more curvaceous diesel that appeared in 1950, pictured here on the left. The cab roof and windscreen shapes bore more than a passing resemblance to the cabs of the 2 HAL EMUs, as pictured here, which were introduced a year or 2 prior to the first of the booster locomotives. The cab fronts on each model vary in some way, and on 20,002 we see that the 2-digit stencil head code as used on CC1 and the Southern Region EMUs has been plated over. Instead, marker lights with folding discs were fitted from new. The top marker light was slightly higher than those fitted retrospectively to CC1. The model comes with a set of either open or closed discs, so you can select your own head code. Planning work undertaken by the Southern Railway and indicated in Rayworth's 1944 report had indicated the need for the heaviest trains to be double-headed, so control jumpers, sockets and air brake pipes were fitted in anticipation of multiple working at some point in the future. Another minor detail change was that warning whistles were fitted to both cab windscreen pillars, not just on the driver's side, as had been the case with CC1. All these variants are accounted for in the model. The cab handrails with their ball ends are faithfully represented in plastic, but other handrails on the model are made of metal. You can catch a glimpse of the interior through the window, but we'll get a better view of this when I remove the body. Before that though, let's just take a look at the second model. This is locomotive number CC1 in Bulleid's malachite green livery, with sunshine lettering on the side. Whilst undergoing tests prior to delivery, it was painted in all-over grey with a dark grey horizontal strip on the body side which featured the words Southern Electric. After delivery in 1941, it ran in all-over matte workshop grey with speed whiskers. This initial colour scheme was replaced in 1942 by malachite green livery, complete with sunshine-style southern lettering and yellow lines at the sole bar and cantrail level, which also extend across the roof. I do love the sunshine-style lettering that the Southern used with this livery, and it looks fantastic on this model. As I mentioned earlier, on this livery version, the sheet panel construction method favoured by Bulleid is more clearly visible, particularly on this side of the model. It's a textural detail in model form that would have been very easy to ignore. The other side of the model has all the moulded grille detail, and you can also see the air intakes at roof level, which would cool the motors using forced ventilation from a traction motor blower mounted on the end of the booster shaft. A 330-gallon steam heating boiler was located in the middle of the locomotive in its own sealed compartment. This was provided with double doors in the body side, so that single elements or the complete boiler could be removed if necessary. These were hard to see on the black model, but they can be seen clearly on this version. The tank was filled via a body side door using water cranes, more often seen replenishing steam locomotives. On one side of the locomotive was located a 98-cell nickel-cadmium battery. It was accessed from outside via ventilated doors. On this earlier version of the model, you can see the 5 sandboxes per side per bogie, resulting in 20 sandboxes in total, some of which were subsequently removed to make way for compressed air ice scrapers. This took place in 1944, so the operation of this particular model variant can be pinpointed to the years 1942, when it was painted in this malachite green livery, to 1944, when the sandboxes were removed. The locomotive's number is painted on the buffer beam, and you can see that the jumper cables and sockets for multiple working have yet to be fitted. There is only a single whistle, and the glass of the original headcode panel has been replaced with a steel sheet. The detail on both of these models really is exquisite, and priced at £157.20 each, well, I considered to be good enough of a price to add 2 to my collection. After all, new Southern Railway locos don't come along every day. Further icing on the cake comes in the form of a pre-fitted speaker if you want to operate a DCC sound chip. So I've chosen 20002 as the loco to try out the pre-fitted speaker. In order to remove the body shell, you first have to remove the 4 push-fit sprung buffers from the buffer beam. These are quite a tight fit, so I found it easier to use some tweezers for this job. There are then 4 screws to remove, located by the centre wheel of each bogie. Once removed, the body shell will lift off. Once inside, you can then clearly see the cab detail. I'm going to use this as an opportunity to fit a driver at one end. All the wheels are driven from a centrally mounted motor, which incidentally has a flywheel just like the real thing. The solid metal chassis provides a lot of weight, and you can see the speaker atop the PC board. The sound chip I'm going to fit comes from DCC Kits, and is an ESU lock sound chip with a sound file by Lego man Biffo. I want to utilise the pre-fitted speaker in the loco, so I ordered a chip without a speaker, although I can see for some strange reason the chip has the speaker housing attached. Maybe there's some reason for that, if so I'm not quite sure what it is, so I'm going to leave it in place. There's space under the PCB to put it. A driver is added to one of the cabs, just using a little blob of black tack underneath to keep him in place. It's then simply a matter of repositioning the body, screwing back on, which was quite a fiddly process, and reattaching the buffers. So, now that the body's back on and the sound chip is in place, let's head over to the layout. Beginning with a test of the headcode lamps. And they're working fine, followed by the cab lights. Now that I know that the lighting is working, I can proceed to change the headcode using the blanking discs that come in the accessory bag. Two white discs on the left-hand side indicate the route code for Victoria to Newhaven trains, as well as several others listed here. Photographs of the locomotives in action frequently show them depicting this code. I've now made the adjustment on the model, and when I switch the cab lights on now, the sound chip produces a satisfying click. You can also see the driver I've added. Let's press F1 and start the locomotive and see what it sounds like. It has to be remembered that none of these locomotives survived, so the nearest sound available is that of the Class 71, which is what you're hearing here. The factory-fitted speaker seems to be up to the job, so let's now see how well the model will crawl out of the yard. There's a nice slow speed control under DCC, so next I wanted to run it around the layout at a medium speed, starting with the outer line. So far so good, now for the middle line. It was on the second lap though that my heart sank. Off the rails it came. The recurring nightmare of the Acura scale Deltic was upon me once more. The Bermuda Triangle of Melchester seemed to have claimed its second victim. Curiously, another Coco locomotive. I turned the locomotive around, and curiously, a third pass was okay. In fact, 2 or 3 more passes occurred without incident, until disaster struck once more. On the next occurrence, I could see that the middle wheel set was almost locked at its furthest point of movement, and it took some pressure with a screwdriver to release it. My high hopes for this model were slipping away before my eyes. It was at this point I took to RM Web to get a few other points of view.
Good evening. Every Monday at this time I'm going to read you your own letters. I do hope they're going to be highly critical and frightfully disobedient, and so help save television from one of its besetting sins, which is complacency.
My BR Green 20,002 arrived safely yesterday. Trying to run it in, I found that it derails on one of my standard Pico points every time. I know people say this, but it's the only loco I have that does this. It is as it runs straight over the point from the V direction. The bogies don't seem to have much float to compensate. I have checked the back-to-backs and they are okay. I wonder if anybody else has experienced this problem and can offer a solution. If not, it's going back for a refund.
Mr. Hatton of Liverpool responded with this suggestion.
Try shimming with plasticard the inside of the cover check rail. This will encourage the back of the flange to straighten up and steer the wheel set through the common crossing area, rather than letting the wheel flange drift the wrong side of the crossing nose or drop too far into the gap, just like the real thing is designed to do.
Mrs. Howes of Oxford also observed,
a member of my club brought along the same model to our last running session and had the same problem. The loco did not like going over the standard Pico double slip. It did run well otherwise, but seemed to be much more sensitive to point work than other models. The double slip in question seems to be reasonably well laid and caused no problem for the other stock that was running.
Tobias Mondeconk Jeem of Beck Hole wrote,
I've not had a chance to run mine yet, probably won't for a while, but I did notice, when looking at the model, The wheel sets have a lot more side-to-side play than I was expecting. I wonder if this allows the bogie to crab in certain track formations. Possibly, picking the frog. I think shimming the outer axles of each bogie would help keep things in line. Don't shim the center axles though. The Accurascale 37 has the opposite problem. Not enough play in the center axles to cope with uneven joints.
Mr. Roxley of Great Bookham wasn't the only one experiencing problems with the new model. Mr. Morris of Lancing didn't hold back.
I was just about to post an issue I've found with mine that may be affecting your model. I have found 2 issues with the bogies and wheel sets. 1. Several power pickup wipers didn't travel the full extent of the side-to-side movement. These can be adjusted by dropping the cosmetic side frames and lifting out the wheel sets. 2. More problematic was that I found on both bogies 2 wheels from each were not in contact with the rail when on flat rail. This was 1 wheel on each of the middle and inner wheel sets on the same side. The inner was quite significantly above the rail and could easily cause derailment. This affected the same side of each bogie, so that when on the model with the bogies at 180 degrees, the affected wheels are on different sides. This indicates to me that the problem lies with the bogie inner subframe that holds the wheel sets in their bearings, with the issue appearing on the same side of my model's bogies when they are facing the same direction. I looked at whether the inner subframes could be twisted to adjust, but was concerned this could distort the gears. In the end, I have raised the seating of the bearings on the affected wheel sets. I used very thin plastic sheet, no more than printer paper thickness. This was cut to sit in the base of the bearing location slots in the subframe. This was done on the inner affected wheel. For the middle affected wheel, I thinned the card down further as the amount of gap to rail was less. The plastic was sufficient length for just the top of the bearing, the width to go fully in the recess. This has resolved the wheels now being lifted and now all sit down on the rail. The keeper plate fitted back over the wheel sets and no adjustment needed.
The last word on the issue goes to Mike from Birmingham, who pointed a finger towards China.
So excited by this iconic class. Well done EFE and those that brought it to us. It was not plain sailing, however, and the usual Chinese construction let down an otherwise wonderful creation.
So it's fairly clear from those points of view that others are experiencing similar issues, mainly centred on the wheel and bogie arrangement. I thought I'd compare the booster locomotive with another very similar locomotive from the Kernow stable, their model of Bulleid's diesel locomotive 10,201. This is a 1 Coco 1 wheel arrangement, so if ever there was a candidate for failure at this Bermuda Triangle location, this is it. Ignoring the non-driven pony wheel for a moment, the wheelbase length is identical. However, the mechanism construction is very different. The end-driving wheels of each bogie have virtually no sideward play, while the middle one is very free, but crucially the bogie construction within the frames of the cosmetic bogie has a lot of upward and sideward play, which enables the model to glide faultlessly over this area on my layout, as can be seen here. By contrast, the booster loco has a fixed, rigid bogie without any opportunity for upward or sideward play whatsoever. To my mind, this is clearly a serious shortcoming of the model. No doubt a cost-cutting opportunity, but one, for me at least, which leaves an otherwise lovely model wanting. There is plenty of lateral movement in each wheel set, but this is clearly not sufficient to cope with a model coming out of a super-elevated curve and promptly meeting a point. I also noticed that this degree of movement resulted in the pickups often not being in contact with the wheels, I had to bend them to ensure electrical continuity is maintained. Mike at Model Railways Unlimited has explored a possible solution to this by fitting plastic E-clips from modelfixings.com. You can check out that video by clicking the link in the right-hand corner. Mike used these to fix the scraping sound he had when running his model on tight curves, so I'm going to see if this might also improve my situation. If successful, that might be explored in a future video. In the meantime, let's see how the model fares pulling a boat train on one of the two other lines that it does work on. Well, that concludes this initial look at the new EFE booster locomotive. I had very high expectations for this model, being that it came from the Kernow stable, but perhaps these expectations were misplaced. Maybe the value for money price range was a bit of a clue I didn't pick up on. Whatever the reason, these expectations were not met, despite the perfectly adequate detailing and livery application, the particularly handsome detailing around the cab fronts. The model acquitted itself well on 2 out of 3 of my running lines, let down by its unyielding bogie mechanism, which was no doubt a cost-cutting measure. The sound profile is great, and the built-in speaker perfectly up to the job, but dealing with this model took more time than expected, and I haven't run the malachite green one yet, as I've yet to decide whether it's worth investing in a second sound chip. Anyway, no doubt there will be a further video on the subject in the future. In the meantime, I hope you've enjoyed watching this video. Thanks for watching, and bye for now.